So now this is a very crude version to obtain privacy. There's also the question of the privacy of transactions and, by association of holdings. And one of the earliest tools that people have come up with is a method which is called CoinJoin. You can see here a little schematic for this, right? So now you have Adam pays Chris money and Bob pays David some money, and each pays the other one a Bitcoin. And now what you can see is, of course, you can see who paid whom. Now, that may be something which you don't want to reveal, because maybe some of the payments are non-savory, right? So maybe, Adam pays, maybe Adam has a particular relationship that he doesn't want to reveal. He doesn't want to reveal that he has paid Chris the money. So how can this be prevented? Well, what can happen is what people can do is Adam and Bob can use a CoinJoin mechanism. And what happens is they basically play into a particular account that collects the money and then pays it out to the different entities, so that it's not clear when Adam pays this joint account whether or not he paid Chris or whether or not he paid David. Now, for two parties, you can see that, you could draw some inferences. But if you expand this to a much larger set of entities and people who put the money into CoinJoin, you could envision that it could be otherwise. From a legal perspective, there's issues involved, right? So when you take money, for instance, from somebody who is a criminal, then that is normally a problem for you, because you basically got tainted money, and you are contributing to money laundering. And so if criminals were to use CoinJoin, and you even as a legitimate person have used CoinJoin too, for whatever reason that you have, it's, a lawyer could credibly argue that you have collected tainted money, which you have to return to the government, if there's proven crime on the other side. So there's a lot of legal questions around that are problematic. But there is also some technological features that are interesting here. And so in particular, there's a particular paper, which I cite here, where, if you combine cookies together with CoinJoin and Bitcoin payments, you can still, pinpoint to people. So, what I'm trying to hint at is the following. When you buy something online, right, you actually leave a trail of crumbs of information everywhere. So you go to the product page, then you go to the shopping cart page, there's a checkout page that you have, there's a payment processor involved, and then there is a receipt page. So there's many web pages where you leave pieces of information. Now, even if you use Bitcoin, which is pseudo-anonymous, and even if you use CoinJoin, you can be detected. There is an article in Forbes from 2014 where in the early days of Bitcoin, people thought they could use Bitcoin to buy drugs, for instance, which is an illegal activity, but it was one way how people thought they could get around having digital payments, and buying things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to buy. And this is not a small thing, just to understand, right? So obviously the drug dealers, weapons dealers, child pornography, all of those items, people who provide these unsavory services and items are usually excluded from the payment system, right? So if you have child pornography and offer child pornography on the internet, this is obviously was a huge problem, a social problem, and particularly a problem for vulnerable children. And by Visa and MasterCard, however, are not allowed to process the payments for these offenders. So it's very important for these payment services firms not to be associated with. But Bitcoin was a way around this. So you can see where there is, on the one hand you want to have freedom and everything, but you can also see how the other side looks like that. And so there was early on criminals and so on would use Bitcoin in order to make their payments, but it became quite clear quite quickly that you can actually detect who uses it. So, as a more recent example, you may have heard about the Mueller investigation of Donald Trump, where they actually sued and indicted a number of Russian operatives in the US. And one way how they actually followed them was the usual thing: you follow the money, and they could follow them quite nicely because they used Bitcoin for the payments, for being paid for their services. So this was one way how they could figure out who they were. Anyway, so bottom line here is now we're going to the CoinJoin, right? So I just told you that you could use CoinJoin to protect your privacy, but there is actually this paper by these computer scientists which said essentially by placing cookies onto people's when using web browsing history and purchase history, that even though they used Bitcoin, they were able to patch information together and basically direct them directly to an individual. So an individual used the web, cookies were left on in her browser history. He or she used Bitcoin as payment, and yet the person was detected, right? Even though this person took a number of privacy steps. And the guys from Forbes actually tried it out, and that's essentially what happened with them too.